My name's Apple. I run the most transparent agency that helps creators get paid. This week, we helped our creators make $705,000. Here's exactly how we did it. The first deal was for $391,500 with a creator that has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. The deliverables for this deal were 24 60-second YouTube integrations. Now, how did this deal come to be? Well, in 2024, we had a partnership going, an annual partnership between this brand and this creator, where we had 12 60-second integrations on YouTube at $16,000 per integration. That was a $192,000 deal in 2024. Now, coming around to 2025, the brand reached out and offered to renew on the same terms. So another 12 videos, $16,000 a pop, about a $200,000 deal. Now, while it's super tempting to jump at the bit and say, absolutely, let's do this $200,000 deal, the creator had grown very substantially throughout the year of 2024. So we wanted to make sure that this deal was on par with the value that their channel was now providing. This is one of the main things that we're thinking about as an agency is how do we structure fair deals? And so if what a brand is paying for has changed drastically over the course of the year, in this case, the creator's platforms had probably more than doubled over the course of 2024. We had to make sure that what they were paying was proportionate to the value that they were receiving so the creator would be, receiving a fair deal on their end. So diving into the specifics of this deal, let's talk about what mattered to the creator and then what mattered to the brand. One of the big factors the creator is thinking about is filling up their 2025 ad inventory. For a lot of creators, predictability, consistency, these are very important things. So this creator really wanted to prioritize filling up as much of their inventory as possible and locking in that guaranteed income throughout the year. Additionally, they wanted to get rates up with this particular brand because, again, their platforms had grown substantially. So on the creator side, those are their priorities. On the brand side, first off, they wanted to really maintain the results they saw throughout 2024. So this brand got good results, evidently, or they wouldn't be reaching out about a renewal. But throughout the partnership, we were continuing to check in with them and knew that they were receiving really solid results from working with this creator. And then also, they wanted to allocate a lot of money at once. Now, putting yourself in a brand's shoes, it's way easier to spend $200,000 on something that works as opposed to splitting that $200,000 across 10 different creators, doing $20,000 tests, and you don't know if any of those tests are actually going to perform. One, it's a lot more work engaging with 10 creators versus one. There's 10 different contracts you have to sign, 10 different negotiations. On a brand rep side of things, like 10 conversations is way more than one conversation. And then again, like there's that unproven nature of, I don't know if any of these tests are actually going to go anywhere. Or I could spend all this money with one person that's already been converting for a full year. For the brand, it's a lot easier to go with that guaranteed option. Now, diving into the meat and potatoes, where were we able to add value to this deal for both the brand and the creator? Well, first, we were able to educate the brand on performance metrics throughout 2024 to remove that old price anchor. So the brand was obviously anchored on that price that they had paid throughout 2024. They wanted to keep paying that price. However, what they're paying for has changed substantially over the course of the year. So we had to educate them on that before we could even talk about numbers. They came at us with this offer. And then the first thing we're doing before we're even countering anything is educating them on what has changed over the course of the last 12 months. So in this case, we're focusing a lot on data because that's what this brand cares about. So we're talking hard numbers, we're talking CPMs. This is really the language that this brand prefers to speak. And honestly, one of the big things that we do as an agency is kind of act as an interpreter because a lot of brands like to speak the language of numbers. A lot of creators like to speak the language of emotions and what they feel like they should be receiving. And so what we do in the middle is kind of communicate in feelings with a lot of our creators and then communicate in hard numbers, CPMs, things like that with a lot of our brands that's the language that they speak. Then we're offering multiple ways to move forwards. Once we've set the context of what has changed over the past 12 months, we kind of gave them two initial options to start the conversation. One, we're either going to increase the rates to $20,000 per video and stick to 12 videos, which would be a $240,000 deal. So in that case, they've got about a $50,000 step up from the past deal. Or we're going to double the posting cadence to 24 videos, so 2 videos per month instead of the one, and maintain that 2024 rate of $16,000 per video, which would put us at a $384,000 deal. We're also moving the placement in the video to be later in the video to kind of make up for the creator's growth, right? If they're going to pay the same rate, they're not going to get the same placement. So instead of being placed in, say, the first 10 minutes of the video, they're going to get placed in the first 20 minutes of the video or something like that to kind of account for that difference. Now, the brand initially indicated some interest in this second option. So what we wanted to do here is to kind of get proactive and think about solutions to problems that hadn't arisen yet. So in this case, we knew that, okay, if we're moving the placement to later in the video, the link placement is also going to be lower in the description. And so if that's the case, we know this brand really cares about that above the fold link placement. And so if the ad's getting moved to say the 20-minute, 30-minute further in the video mark, then the ad is also going to get moved further down in that description. So we wanted to get ahead of that potential concern from the brand regarding performance by giving them some proactive solutions to be thinking about. So the first of which is that we decided to upgrade 3 of their videos to that earlier link placement at an additional $2,500. So a 15% premium to allow the brand to kind of test and gather their own data to determine whether or not performance does change substantially by getting that later placement. We sold 3 videos at $18,500 and then the remaining videos at 16. And so during Q1, they're going to be testing these 3 initial premium videos alongside some of the later placement videos to figure out if there really is a performance difference. The last thing we were doing within this negotiation was just always keeping momentum going throughout the conversation. So in every piece of communication, whether it was a call, whether it was an email, whether it was a text message, there were always clear next steps of what we needed from the brand or what the brand was waiting on from us in order to keep momentum moving forward. Because of that, we were able to close this deal in about 2 weeks, which is pretty quick for a deal of this size, right? There were a lot of moving pieces, and so being able to close that out quickly was something that only happened because we were just being very, very proactive throughout the entire process and just getting in front of any potential issues before they turned into issues. That being said, there were definitely some things that could have gone better, could have gone smoother with this deal and things that we could improve moving forward. And the first of which is exploring broader, kind of like brand ambassador type opportunities. So this is one of the creators that this particular brand is spending the most money on. And so what I mean by brand ambassador is kind of making them the face of the brand, so to speak. This can be done through things like usage rights. This can be done through things like, shooting ads on site with the creator that can then be run on TV, that can be run on different social platforms. And so that isn't something that we're really tapped into here. It's something that we'll probably look at throughout the course of the year. But we could have introduced that conversation during this initial negotiation just to kind of plant the seed and figure out if that is a direction that this brand is open to moving in. Again, given that this is one of the most substantial partnerships that they're working on and where they're spending a lot of money in one spot. Second thing we could have done better, when we were tackling that link placement concern where, the link is going to be moved further down in the description, we could have more thoroughly done that by suggesting QR codes. As many of this particular channel's viewers are watching on TV, QR codes can be a great way to capture additional link clicks and conversions where, in addition to having that link in the description, you've also got the QR code on screen that people can scan while they're watching, even on their computer, you can pull out your phone, scan the QR code. So that's something that we could have suggested to alleviate their concerns there as well. Then the last thing I think we could have done a little bit better is started with a slightly larger premium placement test. So instead of just doing 3 premium placements, I think 6 honestly would have been a better number to test with, given that this is such a long-term partnership. And, with 3 videos, there is the chance that, maybe they all underperform, maybe they all overperform. With 6, it's just a better sample size, especially if the total deal size is 24. But I do think that 3 is a pretty decent amount to test with. Now, from here, the deal is signed and set, and the creator's already getting started with making the content. So all that's left to do really is thoroughly monitor the results from one ad to the next and iterate. So iterating is something that's very, very important to us. We want to make sure that, especially with long-term partnerships like this, we're always getting better. So with each ad that goes out, we want to gather data. We want to figure out, did this messaging perform better? Did that call to action perform better? And make sure that we're constantly trying new things rather than just, sitting on our laurels. It's like, we've got this contract signed, we can just do whatever we want. Like, no, we want to make sure that we're constantly over delivering, especially for brands that are committing to our creators in such a substantial way. Say there's an empty ad slot coming up that this creator hasn't filled, maybe we'll throw in an extra ad for free there, just as a show of goodwill. If the brand's paying for 24 slots, we give them a 25th for free. That's not going to be a huge deal on our end, but that could do a lot to improve the relationship. Now, I want to mention, I'm also going to boil down all the biggest takeaways and learnings from all of these deals at the end. So make sure you stick around. With this second deal, this was a $77,000 deal with a creator with over 2.5 million Instagram followers. The deliverables were 2 Instagram reels that were also reposted to Instagram stories. Now, how did this particular deal come about? We had an initial 1 video test with this creator and this brand in Q2. Then we ran another test with a slightly larger scope in Q3. And then in Q4, the brand wanted to renew. Now, they had a fixed budget of $77,000. And for that, they wanted 3 videos. Now, diving into this specific deal, what mattered to the creator? Well, there were 3 main factors that they cared about. First was a high rate. So their platforms had grown substantially throughout the course of Q2 and Q3, and the brand was seeing positive ROI. So the creator really wanted to keep the rate moving up to ensure that everyone was happy working together long term. And this is a pretty important point to make. Like, if you're working with a brand long term, you want to set the expectation that rates will increase over time. It's kind of like, if you're renting from a landlord, the landlord wants to continue to raise rents every single year so that they don't have to just do a massive rent raise in, say, 5 years when inflation has gotten to the point where they're just like not really making any money anymore. They want to set the expectation that every 12 months, your rent is going to go up a little bit. And so that's what we want to make sure we're doing with all of our partnerships, right? Because if we just keep the rate the same for too long, then eventually the deal's just not going to be fair anymore. And the creator's going to need to have a massive jump up in rate, which is going to be a much tougher pill for a brand to swallow, as opposed to just, ratcheting that rate up little by little every time we have a renewal. So, in one sense, taking the easy path of just saying, yep, sure, we'll keep the rate the same is going to make things harder, because at a certain point, you're not going to want to take that rate anymore, and having to jump by, say, 50%, 100%, rather than just ratcheting up by 20, 25% at a time is typically a lot more difficult. Creator cares about a high rate. Creator cares about low lift. So they want minimal unique creatives. So cross posting is a big thing for this creator. And they want to make sure that, they don't have to shoot 10 different videos to post in 10 different places. Last thing the creator cares about, creative freedom. So they know, as most creators do, what's going to perform well for their audience. And based on these previous campaigns that they'd already done with this brand, they knew what their audience liked with this brand in particular. And one of the previous videos had actually gotten over 1 million views in the first day. So this creator just wanted to kind of be left alone and have the freedom to make the videos that they knew were going to do well. On the brand side, they cared a lot about 2 things. First was their CAC target. So CAC stands for customer acquisition cost. And this is what a lot of brands care about if they're approaching influencer marketing from a performance standpoint, where they need the conversions to back out to certain numbers. And so in this case, that's what this brand cares about. They need the content posted in trackable places. So Instagram generally versus TikTok, we tend to see stronger trackability with Instagram as opposed to TikTok. With that as well, with that CAC target, they want to see more deliverables. The more different pieces of content we can put out there, the more clicks we're going to get, the more clicks we're going to get, the more conversions we're going to get, the happier that they're going to be. Second thing they cared about was their quarterly budget allocation. So like I mentioned, they had $77,000 to spend. How that actually broke down was they had $26,000 remaining for their Q4 budget and $51,000 for their Q1 budget. So how did we dive in here, get this deal done, add some value? First thing is that we planned for the long term. So we started off the conversation by talking about how we could expand this partnership long-term in more creative ways. Before we even got into the negotiation of like, what are we going to do with the 77 grand? We wanted to just figure out, how can we think beyond just the next couple of months and plan into the coming years, because this brand had already renewed 2 times. They were already getting good results. It's like, we don't need to test anymore, right? Like, we know there are conversions. Let's just get into it. Initially, they wanted 3 Instagram reels. What we ended up settling on was 2 Instagram reels reposted to 2 Instagram stories. So the creators only got to make 2 videos. The brand gets 4 unique pieces of content that are all going to be generating clicks because they're all going to have that trackable link. And the creator sees about a 50% increase in rate per video compared to subsequent deals with this brand. So again, that's that ratcheting up that we want to see every time we're partnering, provided that the creator's growing, right? If the creator's viewership's going down, if they're not generating as much buzz per video, then like there might not be a case to be made for ratcheting up the rate every single time you work with a brand. Like, it's not just about raising the rate to raise the rate. It's about making sure that you're creating a fair deal every single time. And so if the channel is growing, rate should be growing generally in most cases. In terms of missed opportunities, I think there's a couple of things we could have done better here. One is just pushing harder for something long-term. It really is a balancing act. You don't want to push them so hard. Like, we had a great relationship here and they're already renewing multiple times, but you don't need to keep testing forever. And so it is important to set that expectation of like, hey, once we run some tests, we're going to lock something in for the long term, right? Like, there's no sense just continuing to kick the can down the road, just signing, 1 video here, 2 videos there. It's like, let's get serious. Let's actually commit to something. So I think even though the brand didn't have funds, we could have predefined terms that the brand could opt into later to expand after and throughout Q1, kind of into the rest of 2025. So missed opportunity, but still played out because we got that longer term deal locked in. We could have had some performance based incentives here. So initially we did propose that there were some kind of performance based kickers where, if the video reaches a certain amount of views, then creators going to receive extra payment. But that conversation kind of died out once we got into the budget constraints. I think we could have brought that back around and potentially got something going there. And then additionally, we could have had a bit of a more data-driven conversation. I think we could have dug a little bit deeper here to figure out more about their ROI from initial videos to kind of inform that longer term plan. We got some initial link click info, but a full breakdown between what were the results like from the previous IG reel versus the previous IG story. That could have informed how we more efficiently allocate the budget, right? Maybe the reels were getting 5 times as many clicks as the stories. And so then it didn't make sense to incorporate stories. And we could have found a way to work with that. But, we kind of just aligned on these deliverables because of what would make the most sense for everybody without having as much data as we possibly could have. Also, one thing that we could do here is upsell cross posting for both videos once that budget from 2025 opens up. So super low lift for the creator to take these 2 videos that they've already created, post them on other platforms like, Facebook Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. To the creator, feels like one piece of content. To the brand, feels like multiple pieces of content because they're getting that exposure on different platforms to net new audiences. So that's something we're going to explore with this partnership as well. Now, this third deal was for $225,000 with a creator that has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. The particular deliverables here are a little bit more involved than the previous 2 deals. Here, we're looking at 4 mentions on YouTube, 3 mentions on TikTok, and 1 60-second YouTube ad read per month for 5 months. So in total, that's 40 different deliverables. Now, how did this deal come to be? Well, we had an existing 12-month partnership going between this brand and this creator that we were about 6 months into. This partnership had solely been YouTube mentions up to this point, and the brand was seeing great results. So because of that, we wanted to gauge their interest in, instead of waiting for the partnership to come up for renewal in 6 months, we're like, hey, you guys are seeing great results. Let's see, would you guys be interested in expanding the partnership now instead of waiting until, 6 months from now? And the short answer was, yeah, they'd be interested in talking about it. So in terms of what mattered to the creator wanted to keep things as low lift as possible and ideally keep things to a reasonable number of deliverables. On the brand side, they wanted to have a presence in as many videos as possible, kind of express some interest in tapping into TikTok. The second fact that's important to them is maintaining a reasonable CAC. So this brand also is evaluating things based on performance. And so CAC is a very important number to them. How much are they paying to acquire each new user? There's also a balancing act there, right? Because if you're going from, 4 mentions to 8 mentions, ideally the brand would want to see double the results, but there is to be expected, a certain amount of drop off or, audience fatigue that can kick in once you get past a certain frequency of mentions. So we were kind of trying to suss out the waters and figure out where that was going to be because we didn't want to overcommit, fatigue the audience, and then end up, damaging results rather than improving them. Third thing the brand cared about was just deepening that brand association with the creator. So they also suggested, wanting to do some dedicated videos, having some ad rights, doing dedicated content, on different platforms, short form platforms, long form platforms, etc. So that's where everybody's priorities kind of stood. How did we get this deal done and get something over the line? Where did we add value? Well, we very thoroughly maximized the brand's available budget with as minimal a lift for the creator as possible. So the brand basically had $250K to spend here. We got it up to $255, but we did so in a way that focused on doing more of what the creator was already doing. Adding a 60-second YouTube ad read, not a problem at all either. This creator's already doing a ton of ad reads. Super easy to get that into rotation. Way lower lift than dedicated content. So we really steered the brand away from dedicated content. 1, because it would take up a lot of their available budget. 2, because it would be very, time intensive and high lift for the creator. And so we wanted to max out as many YouTube mentions as we can. So we took those from, the initial 2 that they suggested up to 4. And then with those TikTok mentions, we worked very closely with the creator's team to do those in such a way that would not create any additional lift for the creator. So it was basically completely passive for them to get those TikTok mentions out, which made that a very attractive deliverable option for the creator. So really very, very minimal extra lift for them and like an extra 200 grand in their pocket for this particular deal. On top of that, it's added on during the existing terms. This creator was already doing great. They were already making 6 figures from this brand, but now we're just doubling down, going even harder. And the creator is just, this is complete icing on the cake because they totally were not expecting any kind of renewal at this point, or expansion at all. That being said, there were some missed opportunities. First of which is tapping into the brand's paid ads budget. So they did talk about usage rights. They did talk about dedicated videos. That isn't something that ended up panning out. We kept it solely to organic content to keep it easier on the creator. However, what that means is that we did not tap into that a potential additional pool of money dedicated to paid ads because nothing had paid usage on it. I think we could have done that in the moment as opposed to waiting until afterwards. But from here, the expanded partnership is going to continue on for a few more months. We're going to keep momentum going strong, continuing to check in with the brand, keep communication very strong. And then hopefully by the time this partnership ends, we'll be in a great position to structure out another 12-month deal to scope out the rest of 2025 and move even into 2026. Now, the fourth deal is quite a bit smaller than the previous three at $12,000, but that's because it's with a much smaller creator. So this creator had under 25,000 subscribers on YouTube. For them, this was a pretty substantial deal. And I think that's a good point to mention, right? Like, we don't just work with massive creators. Our priority is just making sure that we're getting fair deals done. And so whether you're a massive creator or a small creator, we're going to make sure to match those deals to the size of talent. And one thing I'll say, like, if you are a small creator that's, listening to this, watching this right now, even just taking a call with an agency to get a sense for how you should be pricing yourself can be a great idea, right? I talk to a lot of small creators that I have no intention of working with, but I like just, talking to people, getting a sense of like where their head's at when it comes to creating content, the business of being a creator. And so I think it just helps to always be talking to creators of different sizes. But, if you are a smaller creator, just talking to an agency and just having a transparent conversation around like, hey, here's what I'm currently charging for my brand deals. Like, what do you think? Like, is this, you think fair? Like, is this what you would be charging if you were managing me? Really, this helps everybody because if you as a small creator are undercutting rates, then it screws everybody else over, right? If you're selling ads for $5, then brands are just going to keep going to you. And then when, I propose to them, hey, you should really be paying like $1,000 for this, they're going to be saying, great, but I'll just go to Joe and pay him $5 and he'll give me what I want. So it really does help everybody when, you talk, you get informed about rates and make sure that you are being fair. In the marketplace. With this particular deal, we were looking at two 60-second integrations in a specific video. Not that many deliverables for 12 grand for a creator with under 25,000 subscribers. Now, how did this deal come to be? Well, this particular creator had been a user of this particular product for years and had been recommending them organically for some time. So creator was super aware of the brand. The brand was somewhat aware of the creator just because they were already talking about their company. So the creator got in contact with this company at an event and pitched them for this idea that they had for an organic mention in this specific video and some 60-second ad reads, kind of just pitched them on generally working with them in a variety of different capacities. And we had a video that we expected to do extremely well on their channel coming up. So it was really good timing to get a new brand in and get them some really solid results out of the gate. Now, what mattered to the creator was creative freedom and the timeline. The creator wanted to fit the partnership into their existing video schedule. They didn't want to go out of their way, create any dedicated content. Like, they really just wanted to find as organic a way as possible to fit this brand in seamlessly into their content. And initially, the brand was looking for some content that was going to kind of stray from the usual that was going on in the creator's channel. So we had to kind of steer them in the right direction there. And then in terms of timeline, like I said, had this big video coming up in a couple of days that we really needed to get this brand on board for because we knew it was going to knock it out of the park. Now, for the brand, what mattered was conversions, how many new users they were bringing in, how many products they were selling, organic usage. So they wanted to include this video on their website because the creator is an actual user of the product. Like, beautiful testimonial to put on the website. So wanted to factor that in. Timeline was super important to them as well. They wanted to move to take advantage of this opportunity. And then with budget, they only had $12,000 to work with for the rest of the month. So that was kind of our constraining factor that we had to work around for this creator to line up the deliverables. So how did we get it done? Where did we add value? First, we signed the deal within 48 hours of our first call with the brand. So creator meets the brand at a conference, loops us in. Within 48 hours of talking to the brand, we've got a signed contract for the creator. This was huge because, again, very tight timeline we had to keep. Next, we got the deliverables in such a way to keep an extremely low lift for the creator. So again, brand wanted to do some dedicated content. They wanted to do a lot of things that just really would force the creator to do a lot of extra overhead. And frankly, we just didn't have the time to get that stuff done. I think a lot of that stuff could be really cool. And so we'll revisit that in the future. But for the rush that we were on. Like we just had to keep this extremely simple for everybody. And then we ended up securing the highest per video rate this creator has ever received. Being a small channel, earning an average of like $4,000 per video is extremely solid for them. So that was a really, really big win. There were some missed opportunities though. So potentially tapping into their paid ad budgets as well. Now we knew these guys wanted to use the content organically, but there could have been opportunities to upsell this as paid content as well. And that might have opened up some additional budget for them outside of that, $12,000 they had set aside to spend on creators. And then also we didn't really chart any kind of long-term course to track towards. So we got this great deal locked in for everybody. Everyone's super excited, but we didn't really plant any seeds for what comes next. So that's kind of a missed opportunity that we could have done a better job with. But that being said, they are a newer brand to the influencer space. So it's a little bit difficult for them to be thinking too far ahead because just spending $12,000 is already, fairly large lift for them. Now from here, the content's going to be live by the end of the month. We're going to be iterating from video to video based on results as you would expect. And it's just extremely important that the brand has a very positive experience here because we want to make sure this creator is able to maintain working with this brand. Again, they've been an organic user for a long time, really love the product, and the rate is great for this particular talent. So we want to make sure that we're able to do the best job possible at maintaining this partnership and growing it into the future. Now, like I promised, we got some takeaways here and then also some learnings/experiments that we're running internally. So in the spirit of transparency, we'll kind of be peeling back the curtain on, our business as well and showing you what we're kind of up to there. So in terms of the learning lessons here, this is like fundamental brand partnerships 101. You have to thoroughly understand the needs of all parties. So with each of these deals, right, I'm breaking down what does the creator care about? What does the brand care about? That's where every conversation needs to start. And whenever I'm stepping into a conversation with a brand and a creator, that's the first thing that I need to have a very clear understanding of. If I don't clearly understand both of those things, I am not ready to suggest anything. I'm not ready to negotiate anything. I'm not ready to talk numbers. I'm not ready to talk deliverables. I can't talk anything until I thoroughly understand what both parties care about and what both parties need. Best way to do that is just talk, ask questions, be curious. Like you just need to ask a lot of questions, right? If you don't understand something, instead of just jumping in with a solution, ask more questions. Second takeaway, be proactive in solving problems before they turn into problems. So this is something that we did with that first deal, with the link placement and brands worried about conversions. This is something we're doing with virtually all deals, right? We're always thinking 3 steps ahead of like, okay, if this is where the creator wants us to get to, and this is where the brand wants to get to, where do potential problems arise? And how do we structure things in such a way that those problems never even become problems in the first place, right? And so things just flow a lot smoother that way. We're smoothing things out before they even pop up in the first place. This also makes you look really good because if you realize that, okay, 3 steps down the line, brand's need is probably not going to be met for XYZ thing. If you bring it up before they do, it makes you look phenomenal, right? The brand is going to say, wow, like this person really understands me. They're really looking out for me. And they really have my best interest at heart. So always, always try to be the first person to flag any potential issues before they become issues. The third takeaway, this ties into some of the missed opportunities that we had with some of these deals, is understanding where budgets come from so that you can potentially double dip. How brands determine their budgets, it really depends on the company. So again, asking lots of questions, getting curious, you got to understand how your brands determine where their money comes from, how they're going to spend it. 3 of the big areas that budgets are determined based on. One is timeline, right? So a lot of brands will either have monthly budgets for working with creators, quarterly budgets, annual budgets, and it's really helpful to understand, when do those budgets reset and how much remaining money do they have in, say, their Q1 budget. Next area is in different departments. So sometimes you'll have, an influencer marketing department, and then you'll have a paid ads department, and then you'll have a community building department, and you'll have a communications department or PR department. Like there are different departments in the companies that have different money to play with. And so when you get creative in structuring campaigns, you can potentially double dip into different departments. So maybe you're doing, some content that you post on a YouTube channel, and then you're also creating paid ads for the brand that they're going to be running as UGC. Maybe that UGC stuff lives in a different bucket of money. And so then, if the brand only has 10K to spend on influencer, they can spend another 10K from their UGC bucket on you as well, so that you can get, twice as much money for working with that brand. And then the third thing is for different initiatives, right? So if a brand's launching a new product, they probably have a bucket of money set aside for that. If there's a special promotion coming up, they might have some extra money for that. But it's really important to just stay on top of, what are these brands preparing for and focused on so you can tap into those initiative specific buckets of money as well. In terms of behind the scenes things and just learnings that we've had as a company this month, the first one is that we've just been really focused on implementing more automations and AI. The largest constraint for us as an agency is human bandwidth. So we need more people if we're going to grow. This isn't a SaaS company where we can just, write some lines of code and grow exponentially, right? Like we need human beings building relationships with other human beings in order to grow the business. And so we're working on implementing more automations and AI to help our human beings um, be more productive, basically, and be able to have more conversations, more meaningful conversations, and basically just do more given the constraint of being a human being. So two of the big tools that we're using right now, one, Zapier. So Zapier is super helpful for us in kind of moving information from place to place, sending alerts to people when, content gets delayed or when payments are received, or, just making sure that the full company is in the loop, or at least whoever needs to be in the loop is in the loop when different events happen, rather than needing, a human being to send a message being like, hey, we received payment for this. You can let the creator know. It's like, nope, we just have Zapier automated, creators notified, talent managers notified, everybody's notified when these certain events happen. Second tool, ChatGPT. Obviously, massive resource. We use it for a ton of different things, but it's really good for synthesizing large amounts of data. So when writing this podcast script, for example, I put, our email threads, our conversation threads, our call notes with these different brands into ChatGPT to help me boil down, what are the big takeaways? What are the main things that I should make sure to mention here so that I can cross check, I take my own notes, I have ChatGPT take its notes, compare and contrast. And there's always stuff that ChatGPT picks out that like I wouldn't have remembered or I wouldn't have thought about. Useful for, coming up with initial drafts of emails. That can be a helpful thing as well. Ideating. So if we need to come up with ideas and, say I have a list of all the things the brand cares about and a list of all the things the creator cares about, ChatGPT can be a great way to just spit out, 50 ideas of ways that we can make something interesting happen. And, most of them are going to be garbage, but some of them might spark something where it's like, oh, that's a really cool, way to approach everybody's needs that I wouldn't have thought about. So ChatGPT, extremely useful tool for just kind of like augmenting our human capital. Second big learning is really focusing on finding the 80/20 for brands and creators moving into 2025. So what I mean by 80/20 is like, who are the 20% of creators that are driving 80% of the business? Who are the 20% of brands that are driving 80% of the business? Because there's a lot of distractions, shiny objects in this business as there is in any business. And so really just coming back to like, what are the fundamentals, because most of our revenue comes from, call it a dozen creators, right? That make up the majority of the revenue. Even though we work with, close to 100 creators, the top dozen are going to, make up a lot of the revenue. So we're focusing a lot more of our attention going into 2025 on these, needle moving creators at the top. And we're also focused on adding more creators that meet this quality bar. And then building on that, intentional creator communication, extremely important to us, right? We pride ourselves on being one of the most accessible and communicative agencies out there when it comes to working with our creators. Like we're always available. We're always a phone call away. We're always super reachable. We need to make sure that creators are the ones telling us this. Like that is how we take a pulse check of like, are we doing a good job at this? Is like, are our creators the ones that are telling us this, not us being the ones to tell our creators that we're the most communicative, right? Like we need to hear that from them. So let me know if you appreciate the transparency. Want more episodes like this in the future? I'd be happy to make them. That's it.